I was a people pleaser to a fault my whole life. At 30-something, I'd been working in marketing for over a decade, climbing the corporate ladder one careful step at a time. I'd seen good bosses, average ones, and some who frankly sucked. But there was one who stood out as truly awful. Her name was Pamela, and this story happened about 5 years ago. Even now, thinking about those days makes my stomach twist. I worked for a mid-size retailer, managing everything that kept our marketing and sales department functioning. I'd been there for years, building relationships, learning the business inside and out. Then Pamela arrived as VP of Marketing and Sales, and everything changed. The rumors circulating through the office whispered that she'd been the fourth pick for the position, hired simply to appease shareholders who wanted the role filled quickly. As a manager under Pamela, my job description might as well have been, do everything. I made sure our website and stores had their products merchandised properly. I managed the distribution of monthly sales materials to all locations. I handled our advertising campaigns, set up and managed the department's entire budget, and project managed every single departmental operation. I created comprehensive reporting to reflect sales trends and performance. I managed presentations and creative briefs for future projects. In short, I did her work and all the administrative grunt work that kept our department from collapsing. The truth was, I had access to her email and frequently sent messages on her behalf, just to keep things running smoothly. Meanwhile, Pamela's typical day consisted of arriving after 10 in the morning, taking extended business lunches that seemed more social than professional, and planning elaborate company parties. I never understood why we threw so many company events. They seemed unnecessary and extravagant for our mid-size operation. But naturally, I planned those too. Every detail fell on my shoulders, while Pamela took credit for the wonderful company culture she was building. I consistently questioned why she spent so much of our limited budget on these events when we desperately needed resources for actual marketing initiatives. Her solution was simple and completely unethical. Pamela told me to take from future months' budgets to pay for the current month's overspending. So at the start of every month, I worked with an original budget. By month's end, I had to turn in an edited version that made Pamela's reckless spending appear under control. She directed every change, every number manipulation. This became our routine, and I knew it was wrong. I definitely made mistakes handling so many tasks simultaneously. The workload was crushing. I found myself working 12-hour days split between being in the office and working after my kid went to bed. Weekend work became standard, squeezed in before my family woke up and after they went to sleep. My husband started making comments about how little he saw me. My child asked why mommy was always on the computer, but I convinced myself this was what dedication looked like, what climbing the corporate ladder required. I was a people pleaser, remember? I couldn't say no. I couldn't admit I was drowning. During Pamela's first major holiday season with us, sales were absolutely terrible. The numbers came in week after week, each report worse than the last. Upper management started asking questions, and Pamela's panic became palpable. Pamela's response to the sales crisis was chaotic. She kept changing her mind on the visuals for our stores, forcing me to redo displays and materials multiple times. Each change cost money and time we didn't have. She brought on new advertising and PR agencies to bring in sales, though all these agencies seemed to consist of her personal friends with questionable credentials. Most frustratingly, she completely ignored our experienced buying and merchandise team's carefully planned promotions, replacing them with her own better ideas that had no basis in market research or customer data. The department was spiraling, and I was working myself into the ground trying to keep up. Then my body finally gave out. I'd been dealing with an ongoing infection for weeks, pushing through the pain and fatigue because there was too much work to do. One day, the pain became unbearable. My husband rushed me to the emergency room. The infection had turned to sepsis. The doctors were stern and clear. My condition was life-threatening. They said the stress of work had compromised my immune system, allowing the infection to spiral out of control. I needed immediate treatment and complete rest. My husband stood by my hospital bed, his face a mixture of fear and anger. He'd been telling me for months that I was working too hard, sacrificing too much. Now the doctors echoed his concerns. They insisted I needed to take a break, a real one, not just a few days off, where I'd secretly check emails on my phone. As I recovered in that sterile hospital room, connected to IV antibiotics, I finally had time to think clearly about what I was doing to myself. I realized how much I was hurting myself, my family, and ironically, even the company I worked for. My perfectionism and people-pleasing had enabled Pamela's incompetence and protected her from consequences. I was covering for someone who was actively harming the business while destroying my own health. I promised myself things would change, but old habits die hard. After a few days, my fingers itched for my phone. I told myself I'd just do a quick check, make sure nothing urgent needed attention. I logged into my email first, then, out of habit, checked Pamela's inbox too. What I found made my blood boil, despite the antibiotics coursing through my veins. My hands shook as I scrolled through message after message. The picture they painted was far worse than I'd imagined. First, I saw that I'd received a lovely bouquet of flowers from upper management wishing me well. The gesture was touching, and I knew Pamela had organized the delivery because they were her favorite flowers, not mine. I went to her inbox to find the receipt and file it properly for accounting, a task I'd do automatically when I returned. That's when I saw them. At the top of her inbox from the past 3 days were emails clearly not related to business. My curiosity burned. I clicked on the first thread. Pamela was emailing her personal friends, griping about how I couldn't just shake off sepsis and get back to work. She complained that she couldn't find any of my notes, spreadsheets, or documents for the work she was technically in charge of. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so infuriating. Everything was exactly where it should be, on our shared drive, labeled clearly and organized in folders I'd created specifically for easy access. She simply hadn't bothered to look, but the worst discovery came in another email thread. Pamela had reached out to a friend from a previous company, asking for advice on how to bring in sales and save her job. The desperation in her words was evident. She knew she was failing and her position was in jeopardy. This colleague asked if there was anyone managing most of the work. Of course, Pamela mentioned me. The colleague's response chilled me to the bone. She suggested that clearly it was my mismanagement causing the sales issues, and that I could be blamed if numbers didn't improve by season's end. This was the setup for a scapegoat, and I was the target. Pamela mentioned in her response that I was currently in the hospital, repeating the dismissive comments from her other email threads about how I should just get over sepsis. Her friend's next message was calculated and cold. She said Pamela couldn't outright fire me because it would look like retaliation after I'd needed emergency medical leave. That would open the company up to a lawsuit. But if Pamela could prove I was stealing from the company or misusing company resources, she'd have grounds to fire me legally. I stared at my phone screen in the dim hospital room, my heart pounding. They were planning to frame me. All those budget manipulations Pamela had directed me to make, all those altered spreadsheets with my fingerprints on them, they were going to use them against me. I took screenshots of everything. My hands trembled as I navigated through the email threads, capturing every damning message. I saved them to my personal cloud storage, somewhere Pamela couldn't access or delete. Then I lay back against the pillows, my mind racing despite my body's exhaustion. I had to be smart about this. Upon my return to work a week later, I was still weak but determined. Pamela called me into her office within an hour of my arrival. Her smile was saccharine, her concern obviously fake. She said she was worried I was taking on too much and wanted to take work off my plate. How generous. She announced she was removing budget management from my responsibilities. I would only need to drop off a small stack of invoices to accounting, nothing more. Then came the real trap. Pamela told me that under no circumstances was I allowed to talk to accounting about anything regarding budgets. If I had any concerns about the department or workload, I wasn't allowed to go to HR either. I had to discuss everything directly with her first. She smiled as she delivered these restrictions, probably thinking she was being subtle. I could see exactly where this was going. She was isolating me, cutting off my communication with the people who could verify the truth about the budget manipulations. Then she'd build her case against me, using the very documents she'd forced me to alter as evidence of my supposed theft or mismanagement. It was actually a clever plan. If I'd been anyone else, it might have worked. But Pamela had made one critical mistake. She'd underestimated the relationships I'd built during my years at the company. Fortunately for me, I had developed a strong rapport with Lois, our main accountant. Lois was in her 50s, sharp as a tack, and had worked for the company longer than almost anyone. She'd seen countless executives come and go. We'd bonded over late nights closing monthly books, and she'd once told me that she would do everything in her power to help me if I ever needed it. I'd thought it was just a nice thing to say. Now, I was about to test whether she meant it. I grabbed the stack of invoices off Pamela's desk, the ones I was supposed to simply deliver to accounting without discussion. But I didn't just take the invoices. I made copies of the email threads I'd read while in the hospital, printing them at home the night before. I included the current unedited budget that Pamela hadn't touched yet for the month, showing the true state of our overspending. I also retrieved from my filing cabinet the hard copies of old budgets with Pamela's handwriting all over them, her notes explicitly directing me to change specific numbers to make our spending appear balanced. Finally, I added a printed copy of an email from our first round of budget adjustments, where Pamela had subtly threatened to replace me if I couldn't do what she asked. The paper trail was comprehensive and damning. I organized everything carefully in a folder, placing the innocent-looking invoices on top. Then I walked to the accounting department, my heart hammering against my ribs. I felt like a spy carrying classified documents, which in a way I was. As I approached the accounting office, I saw Lois at her desk. Perfect timing. She looked up and smiled, starting to say something about the invoices. I cut her off with a stern look that surprised both of us. In a voice loud enough for anyone nearby to hear, I said that Pamela was the only person in our department that Lois was allowed to talk to about our budget and invoices. I emphasized that these were Pamela's direct orders. Lois's smile faded. Her eyes dropped to the suspiciously thick file folder I was placing on her desk. Far too thick for just a week's worth of invoices. Our eyes met. In that moment, an entire conversation happened in silence. Lois understood. She gave a firm, almost imperceptible nod, then lovingly but firmly kicked me out of her office. I walked back to my desk, my legs shaking. I'd done it. Whatever happened next was out of my hands. I buried myself in work, trying to act normal while my insides churned with anxiety. What if I'd misread Lois? What if she decided to ignore what I'd given her? What if Pamela found out before anything could be done? The next few days were torture. I jumped every time my phone rang, expecting to be summoned to HR or confronted by Pamela, but Pamela seemed oblivious. She continued her usual routine of late arrivals, long lunches, and minimal actual work. I kept my head down and waited. Within the week, everything exploded. I arrived at work one morning to find Pamela's office dark and empty. Whispers spread through the department like wildfire. By noon, it was confirmed. Pamela had been fired. The CEO and HR director personally brought me into a conference room that afternoon. I braced myself, still half expecting this to be the moment they'd accuse me of something. Instead, the CEO apologized. He apologized for everything I'd been through, for not seeing what was happening, for allowing Pamela's mismanagement to continue unchecked. The HR director explained that Lois had brought them the documents I'd provided, along with her own concerns about budget irregularities she'd noticed. They'd conducted a swift internal investigation. The evidence was overwhelming. Pamela had been manipulating budgets, misusing company funds for personal gain through her friends' agencies, and attempting to frame me for her own misconduct. They offered me a paid one-week vacation to take at my discretion, additional compensation for my troubles, and assured me my job was secure. I felt vindicated but also exhausted. The fight had taken everything out of me. In the following months, I heard through the grapevine that Pamela was job hopping, unable to hold a position for long. Her reputation had followed her. I stayed at the company for another year, but eventually left due to other issues with the business. The company culture, while improved after Pamela's departure, Still had problems that couldn't be easily fixed. I needed a fresh start somewhere that valued employee well-being from the top down. I took my decade of experience and found a new position as a manager for sales and marketing at a different company. This time, I was careful during interviews. I asked about work-life balance. I asked about management philosophy. I wasn't going to make the same mistakes again. My new boss, Mike, was everything Pamela wasn't. He was in his 40s, experienced but humble, confident but collaborative. He trusted my business decisions and backed me up on practically everything. When I suggested new strategies, he listened. When I made mistakes, he helped me learn instead of throwing me under the bus. For the first time in years, I actually enjoyed my job. I went home at reasonable hours. I had dinner with my family. I stopped working weekends unless there was a genuine emergency. My health improved. My relationships improved. I was good at my job, maybe better than ever, because I wasn't burning myself out. After a year with Mike's team, we decided to expand. We were hiring additional staff for me to solely manage and direct. Building my own team was exciting and terrifying. I wanted to create the kind of environment I'd always wanted to work in. Today, I sat at my desk reviewing applications for the new positions. Dozens of resumes filled my screen, each representing someone hoping for an opportunity. I took my time with each one, reading carefully, looking for candidates who'd fit our culture and bring valuable skills. Then I saw a name that made me freeze. Pamela. I stared at it, thinking it had to be a coincidence. Lots of people shared common names, but as I opened the resume and scanned the details, my stomach dropped. It was her. Definitely her. Our old company was listed with VP of Marketing and Sales as her title. The dates matched. This was my former boss, the woman who'd tried to destroy my career and nearly destroyed my health. I sat back in my chair, processing this surreal moment. Pamela had clearly fallen down the corporate ladder since our time together. The VP position at our old company was the highest title she'd earned. Everything after that showed a pattern of increasingly junior roles at smaller companies, none lasting more than a year or two. Job hopping had become her career trajectory, probably because her incompetence caught up with her at each stop. What really amazed me was the audacity of her resume. She'd embellished her achievements dramatically, claiming work I'd managed as her own accomplishments. She took credit for marketing campaigns I'd designed, budget management I'd handled, and operational improvements I'd implemented. Most egregiously, she claimed she'd generated 87% sales growth during the holiday season at our previous company. That was a complete fabrication. Sales had been terrible that season, part of why she'd been fired. She was banking on potential employers not checking those claims too closely. I opened her application in our hiring system and stared at the options. Interview. Maybe. Disqualified. My cursor hovered over each choice. Part of me was tempted to bring her in for an interview, just to see her face when she walked in and recognized me. The shock would be priceless. I could ask her pointed questions about her achievements, watch her squirm as she tried to back up her lies. I could make her feel a fraction of the powerlessness and fear I'd felt when she'd tried to frame me. But I thought about Mike, about the trust he'd placed in me to build this team. Bringing in a candidate I knew was incompetent and dishonest, just for my own satisfaction, would waste company time and resources. It would raise questions about my judgment and professionalism. Was petty revenge worth risking Mike's faith in my decision-making abilities? The answer was no. I'd worked too hard to rebuild my career and reputation. Besides, the best revenge wasn't dragging her in to humiliate her. The best revenge was succeeding without her, building something good, and ensuring she'd never have the chance to harm anyone in my organization. As a lifelong people-pleaser who firmly believed in giving everyone a chance, I'd always struggled with saying no. I'd always wondered if I was being too harsh, too judgmental, if I should extend more grace. But this situation was different. This wasn't about someone who'd made mistakes or was rough around the edges. This was about someone who'd deliberately tried to harm me, who'd shown a pattern of incompetence and dishonesty. Some people didn't deserve another chance, at least not from me. My finger moved to the disqualified button. I clicked it. The satisfaction that flooded through me was immense. It wasn't the explosive, Dramatic revenge I'd sometimes fantasized about during my worst days under Pamela's management. It was quiet, private, and absolute. She'd never know I was the one who'd reviewed her application. She'd never know how close she'd come to facing me again. She'd just receive a generic rejection email, or more likely, no response at all. She'd continue her job search, probably embellishing her resume further with each application, burning bridges, and wondering why doors kept closing. Meanwhile, I'd continue building my team with people who deserved to be here. I'd create the kind of workplace I'd always wanted, where people were valued and respected, where hard work was recognized, not exploited, where honesty mattered more than office politics, where managers supported their teams instead of sabotaging them. I closed Pamela's application and moved on to the next resume. This candidate looked promising, someone with a solid track record and realistic claims about their achievements. I made a note to schedule a phone interview. By the end of the day, I'd identified several strong candidates. My team was coming together. That evening, I went home at 5:30, right on time. My family was happy to see me, and I was fully present with them, not distracted by work stress or secretly checking emails. We had dinner together, talked about our days, laughed about silly things. This was what I'd been missing during those awful years with Pamela. This was what I'd nearly lost to sepsis and stress. As I tucked my child into bed that night, I felt grateful for how things had turned out. The experience with Pamela had been horrible, but it taught me valuable lessons about boundaries, self-worth, and standing up for myself. And today, I'd gotten the perfect ending to that chapter. Justice served cold and simple, with a single click.